Anna. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to the first Alpha Wolves edition. Please don't be shy. Come in if you like. There is another panel happening on. Don't go to the other one. All right. Thank you for coming this morning. As Anna said, this is a very interesting topic which I would like to discuss with you. This is a conversation, so please do feel free to ask questions, raise your hand. And maybe because we don't have that many people just yet in the room, I just wanted to improvise and maybe we can do a quick round of intros. So why don't we start, sorry to put you on the spot, but maybe just a few words about your company and what is it that you do?
So I'm on the investor side, work for B2 Ventures with a corporate venture capital arm of British American Capital.
Great, thank you. Thank you for coming. Okay, would you like to say your name, perhaps? Oh gosh, great. Nice to meet you. Over there. Wolf Summit, great. Mike?
Summit. I'll spare you all the speech.
Well, it's Mike actually made time to come to the presentation, so it must be something quite good about it, I hope.
You don't want to know what will happen to me if I didn't turn up.
Thank you for coming. Irina?
Hi, my name is Irina. I'm in the media sector, running a media platform reporting on the news in Southeastern Europe.
Irina is very modest, so she's from The Recursive, actually one of the largest media publications in Central Eastern Europe.
Thank you.
Great. Maybe a few words about myself, just to put things into context. I come from a marketing background. I've worked with startups at different stages of growth, from pre-seed all the way to pre-IPO. I actually had one company that I founded in London in food tech. I grew the team to seven people. We had 20 partners on board, but then problems with the team, the product, some of you probably listening in today might relate to, decided to fold the company, and that propelled me to work for Startup Bootcamp, which is one of the largest global network of accelerators. I run their marketing department in London, and then I moved on to corporate venture building and corporate innovation with Raymaking. During the pandemic, as probably some of you as well have done, there's been a lot of changes, and I decided to return to Central Eastern Europe because this region has a lot to promise. And I founded Gry Ventures, which is a startup studio. Essentially, we build our own companies, but we also happen to work with more mature companies on product, marketing, and design. And one other areas where we support them is with media for equity investments, and that's essentially the topic of today. This is a presentation that is mostly designed for the startups, but there are some investor considerations, so I do hope this is going to be worth your time. And please feel free to ask questions as we go through. Has anyone ever heard about the concept of media for equity or airtime for equity? Okay. Okay, great. Which probably makes this topic even more relevant. But before we go into explaining how it works, I think I just want to put a few things into context with media for equity and how this actually started and why this is actually gaining so much relevance today. One reason is because although we see a lot of high valuations and probably unicorn status reaching that unicorn level within a couple of years now, there's still a lot of problems that are hiding behind these high numbers that we see. One such problem is that still companies, 34% of them fail because of product market fit, and then an additional 22% because of the marketing and the lack of marketing in the team. I think it's an inherent problem we have when we start our company. We think about traction and proving that model. And then marketing and branding is kind of like the least of a priority. So that is one reason. But the second reason, which is the interesting reason why media for equity started in Europe, and Europe is leading, is because of lack of capital. So 20 years ago, companies that were struggling to raise money, and basically a lot of the media groups came up with a quite innovative way of supporting that company, especially B2C consumer companies, to raise money in exchange, giving them airtime in exchange for equity. And this is the reason why this is happening in Europe. If you look at the US, actually, you don't see the same trend, and that's because the lack of capital wasn't as severe as in Europe. So over the last roughly 2 decades, we've seen this starting with 7 Ventures in Germany. They were the first ones to do it. And then quickly this picked up in other countries, in the Nordics, aggregate media. And then as we go through all across Europe, now we have the UK, France is picking up as well, Italy and Spain. And you will see through the next slides as well, this is actually expanding all across the world. So basically, media for equity emerged as a complementary model to venture capital. I always mention this because there are companies that compare the two and they think that you have to choose is one or the other, or VCs is better, or media for equity because it doesn't involve direct cash, it's less important. In fact, this is a perfect combination, for example, for startups here in the room or listening in, to bridge around, to actually raise media for equity alongside a cash investment. And that's because it will give you, on one hand, maybe a longer runway by preserving that cash. Essentially, you are giving away equity in exchange for specific time, either on TV, radio, outdoor. And the second reason as well is I just wanted to basically explain maybe this model quickly, and also to make a huge difference between what you're seeing with the German media pool, for example, and some of the independent funds, right? Because German media pool in Germany, they are an aggregate independent fund. What that basically means, you have LPs from different media stations, maybe outdoor or print, that collectively put in some of that media space. There's not a dedicated fund per se. Every deal happens. Every single kind of TV campaign is designed for the startup and what it needs. But there are also independent funds attached to a corporate or a media group, like Channel 4, for example, or even TVN in Poland that has done this before, the acquisition of Discovery. So this is just a very basic representation. I appreciate it doesn't go into the details of how it works and it's overly simplified. But essentially, when a company is looking to raise media for equity, you sit down with the investor, you go, first of all, through a media planning. You're trying to understand what are the objectives that you like to achieve with a campaign. And based on that, you create the campaign, you know exactly how much you have to spend. And that essentially gets converted into a price tag, and that's how you have the equity percentage. It's all based on the company valuation, of course, and the different stages of growth. So I can't really give. I always get the question, how much is it? Is it 3%, 5%? Well, it really depends on the stages of growth of the company and how much you're looking to raise based on your objectives. Yes?
How do you value the media?
The media in terms of the...
So like the airtime for startups, how do you put a value to that?
So for example, it depends on the objective you're trying to achieve. Let's say you are a new brand coming to market, and I have a couple of examples. So if you take, for example, UK TV in the UK invested £1 million in a new company called PitPat. They're essentially like a Fitbit for dogs. How they came up with that 1 million, it really comes down to what they're trying to achieve. So for example, they managed to reach 50% 1+ reach of all the UK TV basically viewers. What that means is that 50% of the UK TV people watching UK TV were reached once with that campaign. So in practice, it works like you would just go and essentially be an advertiser like Coca-Cola, trying to come up with what is actually the best media planning for me. And then that gets translated into an equity percentage. It's usually done via convertible note. So that's actually one of the reasons that media for equity for a startup, it's basically quite powerful beyond seed or even Series A. So first you have to have raised an investment, but at the same time, you can't just go on TV, especially on TV, if your brand is not ready. I hope that answers. Is that, yeah? Okay. You're welcome. So this is actually a nice segue into the chapter, there's a lot of still preconceptions, and I appreciate that we're living in a digital world, right? So TV, does it work anymore? Nobody's watching TV anymore, or is it too expensive for my company? And I don't want to say they're all myths. Obviously, in some cases, TV would probably not work. But if we actually take the UK example again, 2 years ago in 2020, 35% of people that advertise on TV actually spend less than £50,000. So that's a very, very small number when you actually think about how much you could also spend online. But I just want to go back to why TV advertising and how is this relevant. And the numbers that I'm about to show you, this is from an independent research we've done a couple of years ago we started. So in Europe, we identified roughly 242 such investments. They're not uniques. 149 of those were actually unique companies that have raised media for equity in the last 20 years. 127 of them were founded before 2010. So half of them were after 2010, just so you know how relatively new the model is, and also companies is still for them not top of mind, they're not considering it. So the majority of companies, sorry, I know you don't want me to move this mic. The majority of the companies are in the software industry, then followed by e-commerce and other B2C services. So it's not a surprise that B2C, direct-to-consumer companies are obviously an ideal profile because you need to reach mass market. Then it comes back to the question I think we addressed earlier, is about the stages of growth. So majority of these companies were actually at a seed stage, Series A and Series B. You also see cases of much later stages. We've been working with a company as well that is raising now a Series D and has done multiple media for equity rounds. And in fact, you can also see media for equity done at post-IPO. So if you also check Game On and Brain Capital International, which is one of the fund partners that we work with, they invested in Game On after their IPO. And this is also just to summarize what we've said about media for equity being a support mechanism to other alternative financing models. And I think we're going to hear a lot about that today, from venture debt, CVC, even public grants or private equity. And we're starting to see this trend not only in independent funds co-investing alongside media for equity, but actually media for equity funds looking to raise their own funds right now. So my example previously with German Media Pool, they just launched their first cash fund opportunities first to co-invest as well. So maybe a couple of factors for startups just to think about whether they want to decide to go into media for equity and or not. First of all, target population and geographical response. What I mean by that, if your company is extremely niche, if you have a specialized software trying to reach 500 people, probably TV is not for you. You might just want to knock on those doors and just get the 500 people. Geographical presence is extremely important. TV still is the most powerful medium for reaching the mass market, but I think we're not there yet in terms of being extremely precise. I know in the UK, Sky, for example, can target all the way to like the first 2 postcodes, which is quite powerful, but still you can't go as deep as with an online campaign. So if you are not in major cities and you're launching a mass like national campaign, essentially you're just going to lose a lot of, you're just going to waste a lot of the money that you put towards your marketing. Proven business model, and this is a quote from Tony, which I think is nicely said. If you're not ready, if you don't have a brand, if you don't have a proven product market fit, then there's no point probably being on TV, because then people are not as forgiving as when you're trying to test in an online world. Solving a problem for many, being mainstream, and you need economics and target market. What I mean by this is that businesses, for example, you also have to think, or you have to already have performance metrics that you know of before you actually do a TV campaign, mostly because you also want to have a benchmark. So you must know your cost per acquisition, you must know your customer lifetime value. If your cost per acquisition are very low and it doesn't take you a lot of time and money to have repeat purchase, you have to take into account whether TV, again, it's rather a multiplier, and I will show you the next slide. It's a multiplier channel, multiplier effect channel, or it might not make sense for you. With the unit economics and target market, there are businesses, particular cases that I think they would benefit from TV, and if they're listening, this might be relevant. First, if your brand requires a strong credibility, we're talking about, for example, fintech products or insurance products. Think of Klarna, for example. This would basically help in terms of gaining that trust from the mass market. The second type of business would be a business that is quite difficult, for example, to explain, and it might require both a visual and an audio aid. Imagine you're building a next tool for measuring the glucose level in your blood, right? So that could also potentially be a good example. And finally is marketplaces. Marketplaces are inherently difficult to grow, and we'll have an interesting discussion tonight about platforms, why some thrive, others don't, and this is a great example because it requires, in parallel, to build demand and supply, requires a large liquidity to benefit from the network effects, and also to be able to monetize and to gain that trust. And so TV actually could probably bring that in one go. I just want to remind you, if you have any questions, just please stop me. I just rather want to have a conversation than just mumbling my way through all the way till the end. And I know there's a lot of numbers, so. And for anyone that is still not convinced, especially startups listening in, I just want to give 3 examples of companies that I know of and some of our fund partners have invested in, and how TV actually impacted their bottom line. The first such example, it's Depor Village. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of it, but it's been acquired by JD Sports a few years back for about $140 million. So Ad4 Ventures, which is Mediaset, the TV station in Spain, has invested in Depor Village just before. And this is a great example of how TV can impact your online presence and search, as well as decreasing some of the other marketing costs and expenses. With Depor Village, they are activating in a quite competitive market. If you are to search right now for sports or apparel, or even for other markets like hotel or bookings, this is extremely competitive in Google search. On one hand, you have search engine marketing, the giants that are paying to own that space, and then you also have Google with their own meta searches, right? So how this TV campaign, and you can see the spikes in this graphic, that is correlated when the TV campaign was on. This basically helped Depor Village from being the top 3 sport apparel in the company to the top 1 in search. The bottom one, it's a representation from France. They are based in France, but the campaign started in Spain. They didn't do any TV campaign in France. They maintained the same marketing level, but although they've seen a relatively good marketing expense relative to revenue, they couldn't become a market leader. And that's what I was mentioning earlier. The beauty about, and it's not just TV, right? So you can see on the top row, you have how these channels are impacted by the one on the vertical line. And of course, social media can impact, and they all have a slight multiplier effect. But TV can actually impact all the way to 54%. And that's because it still remains a great medium that has both audio and a visual aid. The second one is about trustworthiness, and that's the example we talked about in terms of how do you value the media. And Pit, it's a very young startup. They've been around for about a few years, and the moment they achieved that product market fit, they managed to get the metrics in place and to have constant revenue. They decided to give TV a go, and that's when UK TV invested £1 million. And the way this is the great thing about this campaign is you actually measure some of the results. I'm still having loads of conversation with startups that trying to figure out, or maybe it's a bit too early for them to say, but For them, the whole goal was to gain brand awareness at large, as well as to explain the product. So the approach was first they run a massive brand awareness campaign, and then it was followed by a more product-led advertising. The unprompted brand awareness rose from 5% to 15%. What that means, if I'm asking you right now to tell me what's your favorite brand in terms of shoes, without any aid, you probably might say, I don't know, Prada, for example. So when they ask for this kind of device in their category, then people would immediately think of Pit Pat without any aid. Their website saw a 5-fold increase, as well as their traffic and the revenue 4.5 from the launch. And finally, it's the ability to scale. And probably everyone has heard of Zalando. And if you ever join any other media for equity presentations, you'll find Zalando, trust me, in every example, because it's not only the first company, one of the first that has done it, but they are a great success story. And there's a lot of things to talk about in terms of Zalando. But for me, the interesting thing about the brand was how fast they were able to enter the European market after the deal with Seven Ventures, and of course the revenue from 6 million to 1.8 billion in just a matter of 3 years since the deal happened. Slowly after, they moved into different markets. They're also in Poland and in a few others, and they also expanded operations. And according to Dealroom, it's valued at over 20 billion euros. So just a couple of benefits and considerations to wrap up. And we don't have enough time to go through this, and that's why there is actually an investment readiness program which we're running for any startups interested to understand a bit more about this, as well as to have conversations with investors. We have to think about preferential rates. It's not usually the case, but a lot of the media stations and media groups do give you a preferential rate. There's access to expertise and market knowledge. If you remember the slide at the very beginning, why some of these companies still fail, it is because of that marketing gap. These are not just investors doing the transaction, they actually support in terms of creatives, helping you with media planning, media buying. A media group can also add a lot of value as well. There are instances, for example, with Brand Capital International. They operate, they're the venture arm of the Times Group, one of the largest media groups in India. They do more than just an investment. They help you basically expand to India. There is an entire soft landing program and support behind it. It is true that you can raise larger funding rounds. And as I mentioned, it's becoming more and more of a trend. Have a look at Neco Capital from Italy. They're investing with 5M. Have a look at 8 Media Ventures in the Nordics. The guys basically left MTV, and now they're starting this very exciting fund. There's a lot more interest, I think, from the region in terms of co-investing. And I think we'll see a lot more new funds starting by these media for equity funds. This is the program that I mentioned. It is the first cohort we're running, and as far as I know, nobody actually thought about putting together a specific investment readiness program. There's a lot of things to discuss. How do you choose the right investor? Thinking about the transactional economics, the legal aspect of it. I don't even want to start, but every media transaction is different based on the market in which you're in. Sometimes it happens that for example, there has to be an actual cash transaction. In India, it's part of the regulation. The media actually has to invest in the company first cash, and then the company would invest back in. Yes?
So actually,
yeah.
So how does it work transactionally? Exactly as you said. Like, I think that the concept is clear.
Yes.
But then operationally, for the legal reasons,
And
how do you execute this?
It's a great question. There's a reason I avoided putting that, because it's extremely, I can't say, there's not a specific, I would say, like universally acknowledged or affirmed way of doing it. Back to my example in India, so there needs to be, because of legal regulations, a cash transaction. It also has to do a lot with VAT and who pays that VAT. Sometimes it's just simply done as a convertible note, and there's not a cash transaction, but just simply the media actually gives away that media space to the startup straight away. So it's not an actual transaction in place. That's why when we talk about media funds, especially like, for example, with German Media Pool, you don't have a pot allocated of media time with necessarily a value attached to it, because every deal, it's different. If you're a company that you just want to use print for some reason, then they will pull the partner for print, and they will decide exactly how much you need. But yes, there is this program. There is also a chance to meet some of the investors. We want to bring as well some of the companies that we work with and they've raised, just to hear from them. It's not meant to be a course. It's all about workshops and coming together, roughly 2 hours a week. So it's very lean for anyone that I'm sure has a busy schedule and growing your company. And thank you so much for sticking with me all the way till the end. Just a couple of words about investors as well, which I think I touched on already, so I don't want to take too much time of this. But the kind of sad part about it, and I would love, we are doing actually a next edition of this white paper, so we are working on it as we speak. But the sad part is that I would love to give you an exact kind of representation of, okay, these are the returns of these funds, this is how they actually perform. And there's two problems. One problem, it's still quite early to actually have like specific accurate information. And the second problem is access to data. But what I can at least tell you from the experience I've had and what I've seen, taking Channel 4 Ventures, this is a fund that started in 2016. They invested in roughly, I think, 20 companies, I hope I'm not mistaken, but already 15% of them, they had an exit. So that we talk about 4 or 5 in a matter of, I would say, 4 years, 5 years. One of them is Pinterest. So I just want to, I know this is not a great way of kind of clarifying how well they perform, and I know we can't generalize, but it's just worth the attention of VCs. And I also happen to have some funds in our network, Media for Equity funds, that are looking to raise their own fund. So if anyone is interested to understand more about that, I would love to have a chat and also put you in touch with them. Yes, John. Yeah. So it depends on, so the fund that I just mentioned earlier, that's actually a cash fund. They are raising a cash fund to co-invest alongside the media. Back to your question, there's two ways, the way we've seen it so far. So either you're an independent fund, so we actually help, I'm just going to skip to this and I'll come back. We help set up Fame Global in Singapore. And it's almost like think of having like a syndicate fund, but the exception is that they don't actually put the ticket in. It's basically you come with an investment, they evaluate the investment, and then we decide, okay, the media campaign is going to be worth £1 million. And then at that time, each of the LPs, which are in this instances different media groups, they chip in. That's the independent fund. And of course, this is personal in my own opinion. To me, that's the most scalable and probably the most useful for a company, for a startup, because you're not restricted to the inventory that, in the other instance, or the second example, it's a TV station. So with Channel 4, if you are to do an investment with Channel 4 will give you the space that Channel 4 owns, which is Channel 5, Dave, and so on, right? Which is fine. But then there are such specific media groups, or even print, for example, in France, that would restrict you to how much you can spend and what you can spend. Is that and in that case, just to finalize the question, in that case, in some instances, they do invest off the balance sheet, like purely a CVC model, or they do have ITV, for example, has ITV Adventures, which is a separate arm altogether. Yeah. Yeah. So with German Media Pool, it's usually like the traditional fund, the traditional VC fund. And German Media Pool, in this case, would be the general partner. Yeah.
So maybe it's a prejudice, but I wonder how does demographics relate to the readiness of media for equity? Because we're speaking about TV, and we know that TV has been losing younger audiences for many
Yes.
years now. I mean, many of us are actually watching TV. So scale-ups or startups who are, considering media for equity, do you need to think about the demographics of their target?
Absolutely, and that's why, this is perfect, Irina. One thing that I just want to maybe clarify: you wouldn't run a TV campaign in silo. You would always look at pairing your TV, for example, and not just doing BVOD, right, which is broadcast video. You can do OTT. You can do, I mean, right now, TV, and I appreciate I'm not a TV expert, but from discussions that I've had, TV is expanding enormously right now in terms of how the ability to track and the ability to reach these younger audiences. An interesting company that I think is based in the UK, actually, Samba TV, they do work with TV stations, and they, based on the demographics that you tell them, they are able to reach that through streaming services. And a lot of the TV stations, they do streaming services as well to target that much younger audience. It's usually 16 to 34 that wouldn't watch TV as regularly as 40 plus. So it's usually TV to the traditional BVOD will most likely be paired with an OTT or a streaming service at the same time.
And then I have another question. So from the ventures and the funds who are providing media for equity, do they offer just, TV and podcasting, or do they have like different types of platforms and channels in there?
Yeah, and that's basically what Jonathan was asking about, the types of funds. And the beauty, like, for example, one such fund we also cooperating with is Televisa. So if you don't know about Televisa, they just merged with Univision. If you ever watch soap operas or any Spanish, they're basically, they are the largest TV group, I think, because it's bad to say TV station, TV group for Spanish speaking any shows of any kind. Their TV group is absolutely massive. So anything you can imagine, streaming services, TV, print, magazines, outdoor, radio, they have it all in their portfolio. And I think that's where the beauty comes in, when you can actually work either with a massive TV group like that, because they would enable you to access all of these different mediums, or with an independent fund. And I think the only last thing, and okay. Well, we still have roughly 7 minutes, but I can finish up earlier. What I want to show you with this, and I appreciate it's very, very small, so you probably can't read, but these are just 2 examples that I received in the past 2 weeks. And the summary of this, and I can't disclose their title, but they are people with experience, and they've run some of the largest media agencies before, looking to raise their own funds. So we receive these inquiries constantly. One of them was Fame in Singapore, has 9, which they are now actually running Fame Global. It's been incredible. They put this together in about 6 months. And I think the reason this happened, one of the reasons this happened, is because Border Bridge, and that's the basically association that we're looking to launch, and I'm working towards making this happen. We have 20 media for equity funds coming together, and there's 2 specific, very clear objectives. One is to help their portfolio companies to grow across geographies, because if there's one problem with these funds, it's usually the geographical restriction and the fragmentation of media. So one is supporting these companies scale globally, and we have great success stories like that. The second is to help encourage either media groups or individuals, experts, to launch their own fund. It's all support-based, and I'm extremely proud of the partners we have, because they're giving the time to support others in terms of establishing their fund. And I believe that's it. I think if you have any questions, I would love rather to take questions than playing a video. But if there's no questions, I do have a short video from one of the companies we work with, just to share their experience. But no questions? Yes. I love questions, please.
Thank you. A question on the wider equity for services landscape. How much parallel is there between what you've discussed for media and other corporates that give people? I might have missed that because I came a bit late there.
It's a good question. I just wanted to go back, but it's fine, to one of the slides I have. I think I've seen this, what you're explaining, Jonathan, I've seen that with software, right? Software engineering firms or software development firms giving their services away for equity. And I think this could potentially be one of such alternative ways of financing. Yeah, I think we just have to The problem I'm having sometimes when I describe this is that it's not framed in the broader venture landscape. And I think that's when both investors and startups are having a hard time to understand what is it, how is this really going to help me? I don't think you can just survive on media for equity investments, same as you probably can't do with software as a service. I think it has to be paired up with actual cash investment.
And do you think that companies are more open to it now? Because I know that often when we speak to founders, if it's not cash, there's an air of skepticism.
True. And that's usually, that's what we hear probably most from the ones that at first are skeptic, as you said. It's not cash, so it's not as good as cash. But at least one thing we've seen, so there is this trend of new media for equity funds emerging. Again, my personal view, when was it? I think a month ago, the CEO of, SoftBank, right? CEO, they said, startup valuations are getting too high, although they're actually investing in some of all the startups that have these high valuations. I think it's an interesting time because we were probably going to expect a correction in the market, and I think this is where this interesting model might actually gain more relevance. Startups are going to be way more cautious about how much they want to spend, trying to look at the bottom line, and this is a way of preserving cash. Yes.
So actually on that point, startups being a bit skeptical as to what they are getting, do you see any link to performance? So, so the deal is not structured that I'm giving you 1 million worth of media, but I'm giving you, sort of a worth of media that is linked to the upside that my media is going to generate.
So Goldbach Media in Switzerland, they do that. That's media for revenue. And another very interesting company, which if I had the time, I would love to replicate their model to Europe, is ClearCo, where they aggregate, I don't know really how they've done it, to be honest. And if they hear this video at any point, I would love to get in touch with them because they managed to aggregate Google, Facebook, ad inventory, and they do that for you. And they don't take any equity as far as I'm aware, but they do a revenue share. So, yeah.
I think they are
Thanks.
in Europe.
Are they? Yeah. I did see something in TechCrunch, or there's another very similar, I think, company to ClearCo as well. But very interesting model. Very interesting one. All right, I think my time is up. Anna, is that right?
Yeah. That is. But don't leave just yet. Let's take another look at Diana. Show us your beautiful face in the camera right there. So guys who are on site, make sure you catch Diana with even more questions.